I want to bring in MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Maya Rupert worked on the Elizabeth Warren and Julian Castro campaigns. She hosts the podcast When We Win. And NBC's Vaughn Hilliard is with me on set. So, Lisa, the Secretary of State said this is a recipe for chaos. What do we know? What can you tell us?
Well, first of all, Chris, this is a potential recipe for chaos because Georgia has 159 counties. And the lawsuit is about, as you noted, 2 different rules passed by the Georgia State Election Board that impact how county election boards conduct their own processes prior to certifying election results. Not only would it allow individual county boards to conduct reasonable inquiries prior to certifying their results, but it also would empower local board members in each county to demand any and all election-related documentation prior to certification. And that bumps right up against a provision of Georgia's statutory law that says counties must certify their election results by a time and date certain. So through this lawsuit, the Democratic National Committee, the Democratic Party of Georgia, a variety of county-level election board members, even voters and 2 Georgia State House candidates are asking for a declaration that to the extent that these rules are inconsistent with that certification mandate, that they be enjoined so that the election can go forward without any uncertainty about when these county level results must be certified.
Okay, Vaughn, just to complicate this even further, it's not just Democrats who are filing this lawsuit. You have people like Lucy McBath, she's a member of Congress, obviously, who are calling for some Republicans to be taken off these boards. They say they're anything but looking for a free and fair election. They think there have been actually ethical violations. Even the Republican governor, Brian Kemp, is looking into this situation. So lots of moving parts.
It's Republican Brian Kemp who may be the one standing in the way yet again here for these MAGA Republican election board members. You're looking at Governor Kemp, who, at the urging of Democratic lawmakers, and Brad Raffensperger has also pushed back against the actions of these Republican board members. Governor Brian Kemp in the last 24 hours asking his attorney general whether he, under Georgia state law, is constitutionally obligated and has the ability to seek the removal of these board members. And if the AG comes back to him and says that the state law does do that, at that point in time, Governor Kemp could then go and hold a hearing through an administrative judge to have both sides hear their arguments on this and potentially remove those Republican board members.
Worth reminding, 70 days until the election. Okay, Maya, so the state Republican Party chairman tried to defend these rules, telling Newsweek, quote, "These common sense changes will benefit all Georgians, regardless of political affiliation, as they are all designed to increase transparency and public confidence regarding our election." What do you say to that?
I say, look, I mean, what we have seen, I think, over and over, and I think it's important that we look at this not just as an individual, this set of rules and this lawsuit, but as a part of really what is a larger effort to actually undermine public confidence in our elections. Over and over again, we've seen in the clips that you just played, Donald Trump going out of his way to sow the fear that people's votes won't be secure, that something is going to happen. What we are seeing is an effort, and this sort of slots in with what really becomes this almost sort of constellation of disinformation that is designed to undermine faith in our democracy and in a fair and free election.
So, Lisa, this is indeed part of a much larger effort. We played all that sound from Donald Trump casting doubt on the 2024 election. But then even back in July, the executive director of the Heritage Foundation's Oversight Project said, and I'm quoting here, "As things stand right now, there's a 0% chance of a free and fair election." The Washington Post also wrote that, according to RNC co-chair Lara Trump, before any ballots are even cast, the RNC has 90 active lawsuits, cases, and is publicizing them, even if they didn't file the case themselves. So is it clear how much of this is legal wrangling and how much is political wrangling?
It's not. And I think, Chris, like many things with former President Trump, they collapse into one here. Because on one hand, you're right to say that these 2 new rules are sort of being offered to give individual county board members the pretext or the evidence, let's call it the evidence necessary to delay certification, which could prevent even Georgia from sending all of its results to the country. But I do think that there's another piece of this that is in search of evidence for a national narrative. You'll recall that during the 2020 election, there were over 60 lawsuits in the post-election phase designed to help former President Trump overturn results in one way or another. All of those lawsuits failed largely because they had no evidence. The second of the two rules that's being contested in this election, the one that allows individual county board members to demand any and all election-related documentation, that may be far less about Georgia and individual county-level results than it is about fueling a stop the steal narrative once again in advance of the election, not just after it, to try and give folks the tools or the evidence that they think they will need to show that the election was rigged, even in the absence of any evidence that it in fact was or will be.
Lisa, thank you for that. So, Vaughn, give us again a look at the bigger picture. I mean, Donald Trump obviously fits into this in a very big way. But to Lisa's point, those suits that came after the 2020 election failed, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Do these folks think somehow this time it could be different? Are they more convinced now that they might lose and they're getting their ducks in a row, so to speak? Give us the lay of the land.
Right. And number one, Donald Trump was criminally charged for allegedly trying to overturn Georgia's election results. Number one. Number two, in 2022, he tried to oust Brian Kemp as governor by backing a Republican challenger to him in the primary. That challenger lost to Kemp by 55 percentage points. So Donald Trump lost again on that merit. But when you're looking here at, just take Fulton County, there was one election board member who refused to certify Fulton County's primary results this last May here. And so they are very well understanding of the levers of what it takes to certify election results. And I want to let you listen to Donald Trump, because it's not just the levers, but it's also the names of the individuals in those very positions. Take a listen to him at the Georgia rally just earlier this month, talking about those three Republicans.
Now we have two things we have to do. We have to vote, and we have to make sure that we stop them from cheating, because they cheat like dogs. I don't know if you've heard, but the Georgia State Election Board is in a very positive way. This is a very positive thing, Marjorie. They're on fire. They're doing a great job. Three members: Janice Johnson, Rick Jeffries, and Janelle King. Three people are all pit bulls fighting for honesty, transparency, and victory. They're fighting.
Those are three otherwise very not public officials, and yet Donald Trump was very well aware of their names, and at least one of the individuals was at that very rally there in Georgia earlier this month.
And the Marjorie he was referencing, of course, was Marjorie Taylor Greene. So, Maya, I talked to the chair of the Georgia Democratic Party, Congresswoman Nikema Williams, at the DNC last week, and we talked about the preps for the election as your cat makes yet another appearance on Chris Jancy. I love this so much. I think, was the last time we were talking about Cat Lady? Anyway, let's go back to the chair of Georgia Democrats. And this is how they're getting ready for what they know is coming.
We have volunteer attorneys in all 159 counties, making sure that when voters turn out to cast their vote, they're actually counted.
So 159 volunteers. Are you looking at potentially hundreds of attorneys who are ready to go on election night? If there
Hundreds of attorneys already ready to go. So they are trained. We're already fielding questions as people are hearing about maybe being dropped from the voter rolls. Then we can make sure that we're addressing that in real time leading up to the election.
It raises the question, Maya, what the heck is election night going to look like?
I think we have to sort of steel ourselves for some chaos, because truthfully, that is what it seems to be part of the strategy that the Republicans are trying right now, is that if they can sort of sow enough chaos, they can create enough of the fear that this potentially, you throw enough stuff, something might stick at least enough to delay. So I think what we have to prepare ourselves for is the possibility that results aren't coming back right away, that people are going to need to be patient. They're going to need to, if, they're being told that they're not on voter rolls, but they know that they are, to, to sort of stay, to work through the process to make sure that their votes are counted. But I think the other issue to think about, and this is the tough part, is that's election night. I think part of the concern that we're dealing with is that in advance of that, this is all part of a strategy to also further suppress voter turnout, because people feel like no matter what, it's not going to be fair. Things are, things are going to be thrown into disarray. There's going to be, lawsuits regardless. That makes people less likely to participate. So what's really disturbing, I think, in this moment is that some of the damage is already being done. And that's what we have to guard against.